All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking to you. It is Tuesday, getting a bit of a late start for those who are watching me live or waiting for the program to begin. I do apologize for that. The new family edition, our dog Dolly, definitely is taking up a lot of the time that I spend, or I used to devote to prepping for the program, and that is sometimes causing me to have to just delay just a little bit. And I am going to try to deal with that as best I can, but I really like to do the program noon to 1. That's my preferred time. There are a lot of advantages for it, so I don't want to delay the start if I can possibly avoid or delay the announced start time. We're definitely going to focus on Mamdani. I do want to hear from you. I haven't gotten calls in quite a while. I have to comment, and I'm disappointed by that. I really am, for a number of reasons, but the primary reason, besides obviously, I want a lot of viewers, I want a lot of people who are involved, who are, really taking this program as part of their, media experience, their daily media experience. I assumed when I started doing this and when I did talk radio, and it seemed to be true for talk radio for sure, that people really wanted to engage in these debates. I mean, I do this program because I wish there were some other programs like this out there where I could call in and I could talk to the host and debate issues and really in the moment have a back and forth. As a trial lawyer, there was something really satisfying when I was examining a witness and really trying to get to and I think Steve Snyder, our guest yesterday, who's now been on a couple times, the retired U.S. attorney assistant, will agree with this. I mean, you really are trying to get to the truth a lot of times when you're trying cases. Now, a lot of times you're not. I mean, that's part of the reason I left that career, because a lot of times you're just trying to promote a certain view or a certain impression of what happened that is not the truth. That will result in a jury awarding your client lots and lots of money, or the jury awarding the plaintiff no money at all, even when they're deserving. A lot of times you're trying to get a jury to determine that a defendant, a criminal defendant, did not commit a crime that they in fact did, and they did. So that's not a search for the truth. The theory is that when you have adversaries who are each examining witnesses, cross-examining witnesses, making logical arguments, the truth is most likely in that scenario to come out. And I think there's certainly it's a credible view. It's a justifiable view. I'm not sure there may not be a better system, one where you task some sort of fact finders who have demonstrated to government officials, to appointees, that they're particularly objective, that they can be counted on. But I think we also to make fair, objective decisions. But I think there's also a sense that no, if you're accused of a crime, and I think rightly so, by the way, if the state is going to take away your freedom, then it should only be if a jury of your peers, 12 people, have made a calculation that, yeah, you did it. And I get that too. I think there's a lot. So I'm not saying I necessarily oppose the adversarial system. The problem I have with it is a lot of times when you're a player in the system, you're tasked with doing something other than trying to get at the truth. What we do here, I don't see it that way. I see this as a true search, a true objective effort on my part to get to solutions, right? To say, hey, these are the problems that we really do face. And this is what we're going to have to do to try to make life a little bit better. And I always, center poor, struggling, working people, victims. That's what this is about here. And so I find it, unfortunate, because I don't know how we solve our problems if we don't talk about them, unless we come together. And I just don't see that happening. I don't see that obviously happening necessarily on Halitics. I don't see it on a Facebook page where there's just people talking at each other, yelling at each other, not trying to hear what the other one is saying. And videos too. When I do my videos, some of them do get a lot of views. I did the shorts, especially. I think we're close to 2 million. With 2,000 for a short I did on, what was it? Was it on the shooting in Minneapolis, the slaying there of Renee Good? It may have been on Venezuela. I'm not sure which, but no, must have been. Well, I don't know. That's a good question. Let me go look at it. I'm going to look right now and see. But whichever it was, the Minneapolis shooting wasn't self-defense, right? That's 2.1 thousand. No Nobel Peace Prize for you, for Trump. That's doing well too. But again, are people really looking to engage in ideas? I think so often we just want our worldview confirmed. And I think that's unfortunate. And that's what we're trying to do here instead, is to have that debate, have that discussion. I do think that Zohar Mamdani offers us a lot of hope. And he is a Democrat, and my theory of change has been we can't count on, certainly Butch Ware, we quoted him yesterday, the gubernatorial candidate in California for the running as a Green, says you can't count on the Democratic Party for change. And I think that's fair, with the exceptions of a few people like maybe Mamdani. And we'll see if he can deliver, if he will deliver, because I think if he wants to deliver, if he tries to deliver for poor Australian working New Yorkers, he has a really good shot of doing that. And hopefully he can show the way. But we haven't seen, and so he could prove to be an exception to my rule, which is, and to Butch Ware's rule, which is the Democrats cannot be counted on. We'll see. He's the show called, was called All the Right Moves. And then I crossed out, obviously, lots of good moves, because they're not all the right moves. He's made a few little mistakes there, here and there, or at least I think they're mistakes. I'm sure he had his reasons, including, he doesn't want to have a war with House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. But I think that war may be postponed. Maybe he's right not to push for it now. But at some point, unless you're willing, you're prepared to buck Democratic leadership, and you're prepared to build a movement that opposes Democratic leadership, I'm not sure you're going to succeed. In fact, I'm quite confident you will not succeed. Only by replacing House leadership in the Democratic Party will you succeed. And it has to be not a replacement by having, old wine in new bottles. You got to have totally new wine. You're gonna make America what it needs to be, what we all need it to be. 240-242-5646. Would love to talk to you today. Just you and me. No guests, no speakers. I probably won't have many or any more the rest of the week. Carlos could not make it this week. We'll have him Monday. I'm not sure when Arlen is going to return. If I see somebody that I really want to get on, I'll try to get them on. Sometimes I just really prefer to speak with you. So again, 240-242-5646. Don't forget to click like, click subscribe. You can see the little thumbs up there, like, and also the subscribe now. We've already been through that. And yeah, on Facebook, love to see more folks commenting. Love to see the debate, the discussion there. Although again, the goal, the effort is to have a conversation, not to talk at each other, but actually to engage with each other to come up with ideas and solutions. It seems like a lot of people don't care about that. I don't really. I think maybe because we all think we have the right idea, right? We're all confident. We know what's best, and we don't really want to hear what anyone else has to say, except to the extent we can either own them or get an atta boy or girl. More likely boy, because it seems like women are less involved in this kind of debate, which is also, I think, unfortunate. All right, 240-242-5646. This is not the thumbnail that I used for today's program. I built it, I thought about it, and I ultimately went the other direction with the lots of good moves, crossing out all the and right. So instead of all the right moves, lots of good moves. But this was where I was thinking, because and we're going to talk about Sia Weaver. Sia Weaver came up yesterday in the conversation. I showed you some of her perhaps ill-advised tweets in which she used the term white supremacy on more than one occasion. I, while speaking to Steve, thought that was very poor decision on her part. Now, I do think, and I did say then, and I definitely think now, she should have stayed. I mean, I don't think she should have been forced out. I don't think those kinds of tweets ruled her out as the director of tenant protection, I think is the title of her. She's the director of the housing office for tenant protection. And she should be. I mean, she sounds like, from what I've read, and there was, I read a lot about her after the fact. And to be clear, I don't think that those tweets should have ever been a disqualifying factor. I think that they're politically problematic, and I think they, divide people based on race rather than on shared material, rather than bringing people together based on, as I write there, shared material interests. So the original thumbnail was out. You have the in, out, we're new year. So out, identity politics, basically politics based on appealing to people based on innate characteristics, race, gender, sex, ethnicity. And I'm saying that's out, and in, shared material interests. In other words, we're going to try to reach people, bring them together to support politicians, to support policies that will improve the quality of their lives. Well, I also say all the time, and I think in the description of today's program, I always talk a lot about workers. I always use the expression, or very frequently, poor, struggling, and workers, or working class. And I think that's who politicians should focus on. But if you want to win elections, you got to talk about workers. I hate to say this, but politicians have ignored the poor forever. The poor are numerically large, but as a percentage of voters, relatively small. And obviously, they're not going to help you win by contributing to your campaign because they don't have money. But workers, sadly now, more disorganized than in the past, and less well compensated, unfairly, poorly compensated today, nevertheless are a significant enough group that if you can appeal to the working class, you can win elections, even if your policies hurt the billionaires. We have seen since at least Bill Clinton, both parties embrace policies that benefit the billionaires and hurt everyone else. We need to change that. Let's hope Zoran is going to follow through. It seems like he is. Keeping Sia Weaver was the right move because, from what I understand, from what Jacobin says, from what the Ross Barkin, who's been following New York City politics for quite some time, says, she's stood up to the billionaire banker. She stood up to the landlords, the private equity folks. And that's really, really good. Now, not all landlords are the problem. And I'm not a believer in rent control as the solution. It can be part of, it should be part of a broad-based solution to affordability. But alone, it is not. It is insufficient. And I think, and I know Zoran Mamdani gets that because he said that. He's super popular. The focus on affordability, eschewing, right? This guy completely eschewed. He did not center in any way identity politics. Now you could say, well, Sia, his new tenant protection czar, in the past, and old tweets did, but since then, she has said, no, my goal here is to make sure every tenant is treated fairly. My goal here is to make sure that landlords don't discriminate against anybody, not to center one particular group of people for protection. And that is why she should be. That's why she should be the director of tenant protection in New York City. This was posted a little bit before I went live, just an hour perhaps. And I really appreciate this. It was very consistent with what I'm trying to do, which is to say, hey, Zoran is doing some really cool things and people respond to it. And this is, by the way, the path forward for Democrats if only they choose this path. Now, they may not. They may say, well, you know what? Yes, it's better. See, it's very important to understand this. It's not the Democrats, the Democratic leadership class, or even many Democratic electeds say to themselves, Zoran's policies aren't good for the people. They're not saying to themselves, Zoran's policies aren't popular. They're not saying that Zoran's policies won't make the world a little bit less bad. What they're saying to themselves is, I could make powerful enemies if I embrace Mamdaniism. I could put myself in a position where I won't get any kind of 7-figure or even, high 6-figure golden parachute once I'm voted out or once I decide to retire from government. If I embrace Mamdaniism, I'm going to hurt myself. I'm going to make myself less likely to become rich if I embrace Mamdaniism. Sure, it might be good for my constituents, but it won't be good for me. That's what Democratic politicians are saying when they look at Zoran Mamdani. They're saying this guy's upsetting our apple cart. We have had a really good thing going here. And when Mamdani starts talking about building affordable housing and having the government own those houses and with affordable rents, that's going to hurt really rich people in New York City, the kind of people who could give me a great job. Like, it's easy. I don't have to work that hard. Just be like a talking head and get paid very well paid for that. I might lose that opportunity if I embrace Mamdaniism. So I won't, even though it's better for my constituents. That's the calculus that Democratic politicians are making. So much easier, again, to embrace some forms of identity politics, to attack Mamdani in every which way possible. And we'll see, can the Democratic Party, at least many of the people in it, make a decision? No, we're going to do what's best for the American people. We're going to do what's best for the world rather than continue down this path we've been following for many decades now. Here is proof that Zoran Mamdani's, at least his message and what he says he's trying to do, is incredibly popular. Ryan Grimm. So you see, there he is. Wild applause in the streets. So I'll stop it there, but you see him with a red scarf and just crowds going wild. And I can guarantee you, if that was Eric Adams, you wouldn't be seeing that. If that was Jacob Frey is a kind of a centrist mayor in Minneapolis. He defeated a more progressive, I believe, Muslim, Omar, who was running against him. And he said some really good things about the slaying of Renee Good. He's really made the right remarks. But he's recognized ultimately as the upper middle class to affluent mayor, the guy who's there for the business elites. That's not going to get you wild applause. By the way, I was really curious where Mamdani, Zoran was walking when all the people were going crazy. Let me play a little more. Let's see if we can see it, because I was able to identify it. Let's see if we can see it here. Maybe it was already shown. But they have the Milstein. It's the Milstein Pavilion. And I thought that Milstein Pavilion was down in Greenwich Village. But actually, it's way up on the Upper East Side in Washington Heights, if you're familiar at all with New York City. And that is a very mixed neighborhood. That's a working class. If you know Lin-Manuel Miranda, who did The Heights, did Hamilton. I guess he's more famous for even is Hamilton. But The Heights is about where he grew up in Washington Heights, near the George Washington Bridge on the Manhattan side. A lot of Latinos, but also mixed, whites, blacks. It's the checkerboard. It's the the stew that is New York City, and obviously this guy Mamdani appeals to just about everybody at this point. And there you can see Milstein Hospital building. So I thought at first that was Greenwich Village, but there's the sort of the more housing complex style buildings as well, the red brick rectangles that are just standing straight up that would not necessarily be Greenwich Village, although there are some parts on the east side. But anyway, that shows you, I think, that a mayor of a big city who says, I'm going to fight for you, is incredibly appealing, no matter what the New York Times says. Remember, the New York Times said, hey, gotta vote for Cuomo. Don't just leave your ballot clean in the primary. That's the New York Times, the so-called liberal newspaper. They hate Mamdani. They are so against him. They told you to vote for the serial groper, the incredibly corrupt Andrew Cuomo. And they could not bring themselves in the general election even to say, yeah, you should vote for him. They couldn't do that. The New York Post every single day goes after this guy. But you can still win. You can not only win by taking on these plutocrats, these malefactors of great wealth, you can garner tremendous popularity. 240-242-5646. Really do want to speak to you about all of this. Again, the wrong message. It's very disappointing, because I've told you I would vote for Butch Ware. I mean, I think he's the best choice by a goodly margin that I've seen running for governor in California. Certainly better than Katie Porter. Certainly better than, is there someone else? I think there's someone else running as well. Not Gavin. Maybe Kamala. Is she involved? Maybe. So yeah, I would vote for Butch Ware. I think his policies would be best for the people of that state. But this is not the way you win elections. And we talked about this with Snyder yesterday. You should engage with the people who disagree with you, who take issue with you. Yeah, they're wrong, in my opinion. They're very clearly wrong about Renee Good. She shouldn't have been killed by that police officer. It was wrong, that ICE agent. It was wrong what he did. It was not defensible, in my opinion. But to call people who say that zombies, Walking Dead, Solus Yahtzees, which I still know what a Solus Yahtzee is, no, that's not how you win elections. It's a big mistake. The way you win elections is you say to those folks, hey, we don't agree with what happened. I don't think Renee Good is your enemy. I don't think demanding that we have armed government goons off our streets, I don't think that's hurting you. I just don't. What I think hurts you is the stranglehold that Wall Street and multinational corporations have over pretty much every aspect of our lives. I think what hurts you is the complete destruction, the evisceration of our environment. I think what hurts you is the affordability crisis. And I'm going to fight for you at every step of the way. And not only am I going to fight for you, I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to hear what you have to say. That's how I believe you can win elections. And this is not what Butch Ware is doing. Now, he goes after Democrats. I'm fine with that. I don't like Democrats either. But you can't just dismiss a large swath of the population that takes the position they do because many of them are desperate, because they feel they're not being heard. Because when someone like a Trump says, hey, yeah, I get it. You have problems. The system isn't working for you. And it's because of those immigrants. Well, they're getting a scapegoat. Trump's giving them something. Democrats ain't giving them nothing. Butch Ware needs to give them something. Not just to demean them, diminish them, insult them, attack them. Again, 240-242-5646. I want to see, got any comments here. I'm going to go to my live. We have had some comments in the Facebook when I've been doing these. Josh, completely agree with you, Hal. The question Nikers are asking is, how do we pay for this if we embrace Mamdaniism? And then completely, well, I think he said you've got to raise taxes on the billionaire class. Some of the programs that Mamdani's talking about aren't going to be more expensive, aren't going to really cost much. The free bus program at the point of entry on the bus won't cost a whole lot because it'll save money in terms of enforcement. Because it costs money to collect money. They'll save that. So there's that. The issue with building more housing, yeah, that'll cost money, but he says, hey, we got to tax Wall Street. We got to put the tax on corporations that do business in New York to match that of New Jersey across the river. The corporate titans are saying, we're going to leave New York City if you raise our taxes. And Mamdani's like, well, where are you going to go? Because you'll just be paying the same amount in New Jersey. So obviously, that's a hollow threat. And if they do want to go, then in a way, there's a benefit there. Because if you have less of these billionaires in the city, then that reduces the demand for housing and therefore the cost of housing. All right, 240-242-5646. Would love to talk to you, Josh, if you want to join me. If not, obviously, I'm glad that you're commenting in any case on Facebook. All right, what else do we have here? Yeah, they can't be reasoned with. Don't engage. I want to get into this with the new housing director of tenant relations. I don't know what that friggin' name is. Sia Weaver. And this is according to Ross Parkin, the first crisis that Mayor Mamdani is facing, the first one. And let's play the video. I did not play this yesterday. There's the sort of dark, dim, shaded copy of the New York Intelligencer. But let's go to the video. This is from an assistant attorney general. So the federal government, the Trump Justice Department, which is interesting because didn't Trump love him some Mamdani? And I don't know whether this may have been a rogue assistant attorney general or maybe not, going after Zoran Mamdani. Now I know you and I both know it's Mamdani, right? I was getting myself confused. His name is Zoran M-A-M, even though it's not M-O-M like mom, but it's pronounced M-A-M, Mamdani, D-A-N-I. But they got it wrong here. And here's the Assistant Attorney General, Harmeet Dillon commenting. Let me unmute her. That would probably help.
And we will not stand. Just because you're white doesn't mean you have fewer rights in this country. We all have equal rights in our country. And we will not stand for New York City violating any federal law whatsoever. They should be on notice. They are on high scrutiny. And we will swoop right in and do what's necessary to protect all citizens and taxpayers and residents of New York where they're legally.
All right, so that is all a reaction to those tweets that we showed you yesterday from long ago, right? I mean, these are not recent. There's one from 2019. Private property, including and kind of especially home ownership, is a weapon of white supremacy masquerading as wealth-building public policy. I actually have to say, I find that tweet very, confusing to me. I don't understand why private property in and of itself is a weapon of white supremacy. And I'm going to get a kind of an explanation from Barkin in the New York Magazine, which kind of when I read it made more sense. I don't want the left to ever divide people based on race. I don't want identity politics. I want politics based on shared material interests. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't pass and enforce anti-discrimination laws. If someone is being treated unfairly, badly, differently because of their race, because of their ethnicity, because of their religion, that's wrong. That has to be enforced. I have problems when we focus on group situations. Like this group is worse off than that based on identity, not based on poverty, not based on inability, a lack of available jobs, but simply, okay, you're a member of this group, therefore we're going to help you. And some members of that group don't need help. And members of other groups may need help desperately. That's where I have an issue. I think we should focus on the circumstances that each individual faces. Or if it's a community based on geography, where there's a shared material interest, that's appropriate as well. But when I say we should focus on the individual, that certainly includes individuals who are discriminated against. You're a person, you didn't get a job that you're qualified for, and someone who's less qualified did. That's not right. But to say, well, I didn't get that job because I'm a member of this group. Well, I mean, is that true? Why? What's your evidence? If there's evidence, fine. But it shouldn't be we look at a group, we look at the individual and we say, did this person get what they should get, what's fair to them? And I think the best way to address more generally this issue is just to say, hey, we're all going to get enough. We're not going to be fighting so that one person gets a huge piece of the pie and another person hardly gets any pie at all. That's not how it's going to work. Sure, if you don't get that bigger slice and you really are deserving of it, then we're going to make sure you get the slightly bigger slice. But even if you don't get the big slice, you'll still get enough. And the person who gets the bigger slice, it ain't going to be that much bigger. That's how we address this issue. So Cia Weaver saying back in 2019, private property, including kind of especially home ownership, is a weapon of white supremacy masquerading as wealth-building public policy. I really don't understand that tweet. But to the extent you argue, well, blacks don't have homes, they don't get to own their own homes, that's a huge problem. That needs to be addressed. But you're saying there shouldn't be private property at all. And I think, and I get that's a Marxist tenet, that's the whole theory, but part of being a human is we want something for ourselves. We do put ourselves first. You're denying a basic aspect of humanity. And if you're calling for eliminating all private property, well, what's your model that does it better? Now, I get it, like indigenous tribes, indigenous peoples in the United States, and before it was the United States, obviously, American, Canada, they didn't have private property as we understand it, right? It was a group of people who lived, families based relatively close familial ties, living in a community where they pretty much shared resources. But even then, even in those situations, people did have some private property, or at least what they consider theirs. If you had a teepee, you might have like a little doll that you made for your child. It wasn't for the whole group. Everyone did get to play with it. So there's part of being human is we do want things for ourselves. And if we work really hard for something, we build something, then we want to keep it for ourselves, or at least for our loved ones, or maybe share it, but also it's still ours. That's part of being human. And it's not just humans. I mean, you have a couple of dogs, they're going to want, they have a toy. They like it's their favorite toy. They don't want the other dog playing with that toy. That's part of being a living organism. So I wouldn't deny it. I would recognize it and say, okay, well, we're all going to want some things, and we all should get some things. But we shouldn't have a society where some have everything and most have nothing. And that's not what Cia Weaver's saying. So I have a problem with her politically saying it, but it was in 2019. And, what you say on social media, I'm not going to beat you over the head with it. We're going to get into someone who actually did lose their job or resigned based on some social media posts. And it's a closer call. I don't like what Cia Weaver posted. I don't agree with it. I think it's problematic. I think it's politically ill-advised, but it's interesting because, Cia Weaver, by posing, by the way, it's interesting because Cia Weaver, and I saw this, she's actually from a pretty affluent family and living in a gentrifying neighborhood, despite the fact that she doesn't like gentrification. So it sort of shows, I guess, hypocrisy on the left. But what I think is more instructive is people can have political ideologies, but the way they live really does reflect who we are. People want to have a nice apartment. They want to own it, right? I mean, you want it to be yours. That's part of being, so let's create rules, laws, regulations that enable people to own their own apartment, to own their own home, to be able to stay in it so that it's affordable. And if that's part of it, but not all of it. The rest of it is rentals, which are affordable. And there's the Mamdani model, I think, is outstanding. We're going to build more homes. We're going to have the city is going to build them. And they're going to be affordable. And we're going to rent them out. We're also going to have rent control. And we're also going to have a private sector. Seems to me that's the answer. That wasn't Cia Weaver's answer in 2019. She didn't want any property at all. It's interesting because to me that argument is counterproductive. It hurts you politically because it's not what most people believe. And it's not what Mamdani said. Mamdani said, I'm going to have rent control, and if you live in a rent control apartment, you're not going to see your rent rise because it's just too much right now. It's, for a two plus bedroom, you're paying over $6,000 in many cases a month. I mean, think about that. A 2+ bedroom for like an apartment for 2 kids and 2 parents. Anything more, it's going to be crowded. Right? I mean, the kids can share one of the 2 bedrooms, or one can live in like a bonus room, which isn't a real bedroom. They don't have a closet. A bonus room don't have a closet. Small kitchen often, not eat-in kitchen. Maybe an eat-in kitchen. A living room, dining room. And I know this. I know this from being in people's apartments. I know that. You're paying $6,000. You're paying over $70,000 a year before taxes. Or no, after, right? It's not before, it's after. You make $200,000, your salaries are $200,000, which is, as I understand, about the top 20% of New Yorkers. You live in New York City, it's the highest, by far, highest income area in the country. So 20% of New Yorkers make at least $200,000 a year. That means 80% don't. 20% are in families with $200,000+ a year. 80% or less. So let's say you're in that top 20%. Your take home is $200,000. Each of you make $100,000. Your take home is probably going to be about of that $200,000. Your take home will be about $70,000 each, $140,000, maybe a little less, and probably a little bit less than that. But let's just be $140,000. 50% of your take home. What did I say? 6,000? Yeah. 50% of that $140,000 that you bring home, that you put in your, that's direct deposited, 50% plus is going to the landlord. It's just not sustainable. And that's if you're in the top 20% and you're not living large. Something has to be done. And Mamdani's talking about that and he's addressing it. Sia Weaver's saying something has to be done. Now, to me, the answer isn't we take away property rights. The answer is we incentivize affordable housing, and we have to take a lot of wealth and influence from the rich, from the billionaire class and the 100 centimillionaire class, because they're a huge part of the problem for a number of different reasons. And that's what Mamdani's trying to do, and he's right. But calling this white supremacy, I don't get that. 240-242-5646. Hey, Ken, good to see you. Ken, I don't know if you ever called, but do me a favor if you want to chat. I would love to talk to you. 240-242-5646. If you want to talk about what are the right messages, because I just have a real, I don't like the term white supremacy. I just think it divides people, and I don't think it's accurate. Here is what the and here's for a counter view, by the way. And Sia Weaver should stay because she's fought for tenants. Period. Here's what Ross Barkan says. I think he nails this, and he kind of made me think about this. The whole issue of white, because I didn't really understand why she was saying housing is alone a tool of white supremacy. It's income differential. Even if you say, well, we have these neighborhoods that are segregated, which is totally wrong. That doesn't mean you don't have housing. That doesn't mean you don't have home ownership by African Americans. So I don't really get that idea. I mean, look, in the South, as I understand it, before desegregation, you had blacks and whites living close to each other, often on the same street. And many of the black families did own their own homes. Now, they didn't have much value. They weren't desirable properties necessarily, but they owned them. So I'm not really clear why this is considered a tool of white supremacy. And I think it's very divisive to claim that. But here's what Ross Barkan has to say. Sticking by Weaver is the right political move for Mamdani. She has a long track record in the housing movement. None of her posts are recent. I think that's important. And they are not all wrong on substance. He points out homeownership historically was a way to reinforce white wealth. The suburbs of Long Island were built on racist, discriminatory housing practices. and political leaders in a humane society would be working toward making housing a human right and not a commodity. So 100% on that last clause. Yes, if we had a humane society, political leaders would be working to make housing a human right and not a commodity. And that seems to be exactly what Zoran Mamdani is trying to do with Sia Weaver's support. So I completely agree with that. No question about it. I'm not clear, though. Yes, there, Levittown, a lot of those GI Bill type housing, those sort of big sprawling developments. At first, they were built to for white people. Some of them, I believe, maybe this isn't true. At least, maybe not the housing developments of the 50s. But previous to that, Jews couldn't move into a lot of neighborhoods. I believe that where I grew up, the house I grew up in 10 years earlier, that neighborhood, they'd had an unspoken practice of not selling to Jewish people. So I'm not clear, and, I hate to use us as an example, but Jews are super rich, right? We're richer than other people. So even if there was discriminatory housing policies, that didn't result in Jews having less than other people. So I'm not clear the argument, right? And also those laws were deemed invalid. So now Black people do live in Levittown. Black people do live in those developments. So I still have a little bit of trouble quite understanding the argument. I've heard I heard one argument, which is, well, homes in Black neighborhoods sell for less than homes in white neighborhoods. And that proves that there's racism in the housing market. But I don't really, people pay what they pay, right? It's supply and demand. So I'm not clear that that proves much. But to the extent that the argument is, well, Black homeowners don't reap as great rewards for the house that they purchase. It doesn't appreciate to the same degree. I'm not sure that's true, because if in a neighborhood, if two relatively similar neighborhoods in terms of the quality of the housing, but one's predominantly Black and one's predominantly white, let's say the Black neighborhood, the houses go for half as much. So a $100,000 house in the Black neighborhood, a similar house would cost $200,000 in the white neighborhood. Let's say they double in 5 years, which isn't really that crazy. That has happened. So now the house in the Black neighborhood is worth $200,000. The house in the white neighborhood is worth $400,000. They each saw equal return on their investment. Each got 100% improvement, increase. And one could also make the argument that if people prefer to live in a neighborhood where most of the folks are either Black if they're Black or most are white if they're white, then Black people can, new entrants into the market actually can buy a less expensive house. So I'm not sure how all of this cuts. To me, the argument should always be everyone gets enough. Everyone does have housing as a human right. That's where I come down. And I think it's pretty clear that's exactly what Zoran Mamdani wants and is trying to do. And that is what Sia Weaver is trying to do. And that's why she should be confirmed, or she should stay. She should not go. Here's what Ben Burgess, I was so happy to see this too, because I was feeling, I was kind of a little bit aggressive against, I guess, what you call identity politics yesterday. And here's what the Jacobin folks say. I don't always agree with Jacobin. Jacobin, I think, has been too pro-Democratic Party. They've used the legitimate horror that we all should share at what Donald Trump is doing to claim that means we have to support Democrats. I don't agree with that. We shouldn't support either. We should go in a Green Party direction, even though I promise with Butch Ware. But they get it right here. Zorn is right to stand by Sia Weaver. And Burgess points out, what she tweeted was problematic in the past, but it was in support of egalitarian housing policies. It's something to keep in mind. She was mostly focusing on class-based appeals. And she's had real success in defeating landlords when it comes to passing bills that have helped tenants, including a bill that changed the laws governing rent control. Previously, in New York State, landlords could get around the limitations on how much they could raise rent every year, because what rent control has done is said you can only raise rent, 3, 4, 5% per annum. And obviously a lot of landlords, when they're faced with a skyrocketing market for homes, for apartments, want to raise rents a lot more than that. And you can't blame them. I don't blame them. Why would I blame them? We're all like that. Does any of us sell something that we own if we're going to sell for less than we can get for it? I don't think so. So no, a landlord isn't going to be out of the kindness of their heart, but they, would try to raise rents as high as the market would bear. And Sia Weaver got laws passed that said, no, you can't just make one little improvement. You can't just put a new door on every apartment and then raise their rent, $1,000. You can't just do that. And they don't like it. The landlords don't like it. I understand that. I don't have a problem with the landlord who owns just one building, renting out, a tenement in which they live. That seems what you want. The problem is these absentee landlords, these giant private equity landlords. That's where we really need to see the crackdowns. And again, it seems clear that's what Mamdani's trying to do. All right, 240-242-5646. I think this is one more slide I want to show from Jacobin that I appreciated, because I always oppose those kind of identity politics arguments. I remember from when they were really the big deal in the late 2010s and into the 2020s. The strategy was a mistake, as some, including many of us at Jacobin, argued at the time. And they point to Adolph Reed, who I often quote, saying, hey, the problem with using terms like white supremacy is that there are lots of poor white people. They're not supreme. Their life sucks. They're struggling too. And you're just going to turn them off. You're going to turn them into Republicans, because they're going to say, well, if you're saying I'm supreme, I have so much more than you, you're going to take it away from me, take what little I have, I'm going to definitely vote for Trump. And that's exactly what happened. And the individual with whom Reed was arguing made the point, well, and this is what I hear all the time, right? Oh, well, yeah, if you're a poor, struggling white person, well, there's lots of rich white people. So it's sort of your fault. You're stupid. You could have done a lot better. And pointed out, Reed does, that a white nurse down on her luck and in danger of eviction doesn't get to dip into the collective pot of white wealth for a subsidy. So that's my point. We're all ultimately live our lives as individuals. We're part of groups, but we live our lives individually. And government's job is to make sure every individual is okay. Seems so clear to me. Now, you're in a community. If the community is beset by pollution, there's a toxic waste site nearby, the landlords in that neighborhood, there's redlining, what have you. Of course, government should step in and make sure that everyone in that community is treated fairly. Of course, that seems clear to me. If the government builds a highway through what was once a vibrant working class district and causes a lot of people to become unhoused, then yes, we have a collective duty to all the people who were unhoused as a result, or even who just lost out, the people who were victims of that policy. But I don't think that the fact that in many cases, those who were disproportionately negatively impacted by government policies are people of color means that every single person of color should be viewed as a victim who needs government largesse. Again, you have to look at the individual cases. And in some cases, people who got who drew the long straw, who picked the right parents, they may still have real problems. And I think we have a duty to them too. I'm not a big believer in the deserving victim and the undeserving one. We win elections when we focus our policy demands on making sure that working people especially have enough, are fairly treated, and then we'll be in a position to help those who may be less popular, may be less not viewed as well by others. 240-242-5646. Here we go. From, I believe this is back to the font. Yeah, this is still Jacobin. This is not Ross Barkin in New York Magazine. Sia Weaver and her organization, Housing Justice for All. So you see the way the terms are, housing justice for all. So she's universalizing it. Everybody in New York State should have good housing. I understand her tweet didn't say that, but that's what she's trying to do. And they've been pushing policy initiatives most feared by the real estate industry. That's why she should stay. That's why he's doing the right thing. Mamdani's doing the right thing. I want to show one more tweet before I move on, which I think is problematic, perhaps the most problematic of all. And I really look to see, I don't have the whole surround. This was more recent, just a little over 4 years ago, November 21. And I don't think this was ironic. I agree with you unless you're talking about rent control, which is a perfect solution to everything. It's not. That's false. It's not a perfect solution. Rent control causes problems. There are unintended consequences. If you reduce a landlord's profits, you're going to get less housing. You just simply will. You're going to get less rental homes. Now, Mamdani gets that. That's why he wants to build more housing. He wants to have the government be a landlord, the city be a landlord. But rent control in and of itself is not a perfect solution to everything. When you reduce the price of something, you get more demand for it, but you also get less supply. So absent some other policy, a countervailing policy to increase supply, rent control will ultimately cause significant problems. It also will reduce the incentive for landlords to maintain their properties. There's no question about it. Because, a landlord's going to say, well, I have to keep my property up so I can demand the best price for it. If my property is kind of slow, isn't well maintained, the paint is peeling, the front door sticks, what have you, people are going to pay less for it. They're going to say, well, wait, I don't want to pay the full price because this apartment's not in great condition. This toilet runs, the water drips. Yeah. Well, guess what? You're not paying full price. You're not paying the market price. You're paying below market price. So therefore, you're not going to get as nice an apartment. That's just the way it works. Rent control is not the perfect solution to everything. And if Sia Weaver believes that, that's a problem. There are solutions that are much more elegant than rent control. The first, I always talk about it, is much, much higher top marginal tax rates. You gotta take wealth and power from the most rich and powerful people. That's just a no friggin' brainer. Our country did its best when we had top marginal tax rates over 90%. There's just no doubt. That is a great solution to a lot. Not to everything, but it does a lot. And then, yeah, you got to guarantee housing. You got to have guaranteed health care. That is a really, Medicare for all. That's not perfect, but it would go an awful long way to make things better for everyone, except for a few people at the top. And even a lot of people at the top would be better off. 240-242-5646. I've been over an hour. I didn't realize it was going that long. This stuff is that critically important, though. That's why we talk about it. All right. She stays. Sia Weaver stays. She's effective. She's fighting for every tenant. She should stay, notwithstanding ill-advised, in my opinion, tweets. I wanted to show this before. Actually, I want to get to this other. The Jacobin article makes the point, and so does Ross Barkin in New York Magazine. They make the point that this sort of identity politics that Sia Weaver trafficked in is no longer big and that the left has moved on. Unfortunately, it really hasn't moved on. We haven't moved on. There's still among the left the progressive movement, still there's a recognition, which I think I'm in part get some of the credit for, that we have to talk about economic injustice. We have to talk about universal solutions. But there's also an unwillingness to break with that kind of more aggressive form of identity politics. So I saw this from somebody I really like, really respect, who talks here about the right person to replace Steny Hoyer, who is one of the worst Democrats and has caused tremendous problems and hurt our country. And this commenter says that Hoyer's seat leftists support non-negotiables. In other words, this poster is saying there has to be the litmus tests for any Democrat that we would support to replace Steny Hoyer or anybody. I agree. There should be litmus tests. And Medicare for all is a good one. Yes, you should. If you don't support Medicare for all, I ain't voting for you. Green New Deal, I wouldn't make that. That's on my litmus test. Some type of very pro-environment policies, yes. Not necessarily Green New Deal. You know me. I like tax policy very, very much. Much higher top marginal tax, much higher fossil fuel taxes. That would be really what I want. I don't know if I'd say it's a non-negotiable, but it should be. But there's just no one who's for it, including even Green Party candidates. Policing and economic, bold acknowledgement and plan to address systemic racism, reparations, address root causes, demilitarization. Well, yeah, I think we should demilitarize the police. I would not make this a litmus test. I just wouldn't. I think that it's a divisive test. I think it's a test that pits black and white people against each other. If you're a poor white person in Steny Hoyer's district and somebody says, well, we got to address systemic racism, first of all, I'm like, well, what does that mean, right? What does that mean? What are the specific aspects? Define systemic racism, and then how are you going to address it? Because if you're going to say, well, a poor white person, making $45,000, $50,000, my family barely above the poverty line, but we're above it. We have trouble, making the co-pays with healthcare. Yeah, we can stay in our house, but we're just barely. We are not in a position to survive any kind of major expense. That is how tens of millions, if not 100 million Americans live, black and white. Yes, disproportionately they're black. But there are many, many, probably more of them are white because we have more whites than blacks in this country, 4 times as many, I believe, maybe more than that. If you're going to say, well, we have got to address systemic racism, what does that mean? What are you going to do? Because if what you're going to do is take from me, who has virtually nothing, very little, and virtually nothing is true, because yes, I own my own home, but it's basically mortgage to the hill. I'm just able to pay off the interest every month. If that means you're going to take from me, I'm not going to vote for you. So I don't think that should be a litmus test. I like the rent stabilization, sure. I don't know, declare a housing emergency. Allow this universal pre-K, free college. I believe in, free college. I've sort of always struggled with that one. Because people who go to college definitely get advantage from going to college. Now, others would say, well, you have to go to college. It's just not true. It's just not true. Sometimes people who don't go to college do better than people who do. And that's not, first of all, guy came to my house today who removed my oven. And totally respectable job. There's nothing, I'm not saying anything, but I don't think you need, maybe they have a college degree. I don't know. They may. But it's not a job that requires 4 years of college to do that job. You need an apprenticeship. There's skill. It's skilled. It is a skilled job. You have to know how to, you have to know electrician. You have to have electrical work knowledge. You have to have carpentry knowledge. You have to be able to look at a lot of stuff I can't do. But I don't think it requires a college degree. And I don't think that individual should necessarily be paying out of their taxes for somebody to go to college completely at no cost. You get an advantage. You go to college. It's fun. It's good. You get benefits from it. So I think those benefits at some point you need to pay for. Now, there should be debt-free college education. There should be some sort of pay it backwards, in my view, where, for 20 years, 25 years, a small percentage of your income, whatever it is, you pay. So it's not like fixed. It's not like you pay 9% of the debt that you borrowed. It's like, okay, you make $100,000, you pay 5%. So you pay $5,000. And then that's affordable. And take it, and it's tax, it's pre-tax. So you make $100,000, $5,000 off the top. Now you take home your income is $95,000, and then you're taxed on the $95,000. You're not taxed on the $5,000 you don't pay. You take. See, that to me is a fairer system. You recognize that when people get a college degree, they make more money. They have a higher lifetime income. So take it out of that income. And by the way, 5%. You become an investment banker. You start making $1 million a year, $2 million a year. Well, that 5%, that's real money, $50,000 a year. Well, people will say, well, college costs $80,000, $90,000 to go to Duke, I think, something like that. Georgetown, Johns Hopkins, super expensive schools. Okay, you pay $50,000, but you're going to be paying that for 20 years. It's going to add up. So that, I don't like all these litmus tests. Some of them I like, others I don't. 240-242-5646. Ken says, yeah, we should take away subsidies even if we don't have taxes on fossil fuels. Yeah, I agree we should take away the subsidies. The problem is it's so profitable. Even without subsidies, it's so damn profitable. All right, 240-242-5646. I think if we're going to talk about isms, we got to define them. We got to define what the problem is specifically and how we're going to address it. If the problem is, well, because of systemic racism, it's harder for black people to get jobs. Okay, let's make sure we have a much more vibrant job market. Let's make sure there are good jobs available. Let's address that in these various ways. That to me is a more profitable, more winning message. Again, 240-242-5646, 240-242-5646. And I just wanted to, and I know I've gone over the hour, but fine, whatever. I wanted to talk about a appointee by Mamdani who didn't keep her job. Sia Weaver, she's staying despite all the attacks on her. But an appointee, tab to lead, here we go. Mamdani's recruitment efforts resigned Thursday. This was in I didn't know this story, by the way. I just found out about this. Catherine Almonte da Costa resigned a day after Mamdani named her director of appointments with responsibilities to strategize recruitment in his administration. That's a pretty important job. You're trying to pick the right people to fill different roles. And so she resigned. He accepted the resignation. I don't know whether he pushed her out. I don't know if he told her to resign. I don't know if she decided she wanted to resign because she felt she was bringing some embarrassment, or she was bringing some, she was making his job more difficult. I don't know. Claims of anti-Semitism certainly came out of this. That's what she was alleged to be, an anti-Semite. And her tweets, I mean, I'm not going to defend them. They're worse, right? Like, I don't like the white supremacy stuff, but as Ross Barkin pointed out, housing rules, at least through into the 60s, covenants were discriminatory, were racist. Now, we can argue over how much they impacted on the wealth of black people today. I would argue a development on Long Island that you didn't get to buy into, maybe that didn't hurt you that much. But when Robert Moses, the power broker, builds a highway, takes the Cross Bronx Expressway and mows down, right through many working class apartment buildings in the South and Central Bronx, that does negatively impact on your wealth. And that should be addressed. And that is a terrible problem. And that did disproportionately hurt black New York City residents. So I'm totally good with that being recognized. All right, so here's what DaCosta, and I say the way you do that is you say, hey, housing is a right, and we're going to make sure you get a nice home. And if you can, to the extent you can demonstrate you were living in that neighborhood, your house was, or apartment was demolished, yeah, I think there's a obligation to improve the quality of, to address it. So DaCosta tweeted in 2011 something about money-hungry Jews, and later she wrote that Far Rockaway train, a train out to Long Island, is the Jew train. Yeah, I mean, it's not good. I wouldn't demand her scalp for that 15 years ago, but it's not good. Now, here's what she wrote in response. This is from NBC. She wrote in her resignation, I think this is really important to bear in mind, as the mother of Jewish children. I assume, I don't know, is she married to a Jewish person, or she was? I'm not clear. I feel a profound sense of sadness and remorse at the harm these words have caused, as this has become a distraction from the work at hand. I've offered my resignation. And Mamdani accepted that. So I'm of two minds here. First of all, I want to say, as the mother, was 15 years ago. She good at her job? Has she people should have some leeway to post depending on how hateful it is on social media. I don't like to see people's lives destroyed because of one ill-advised or two ill-advised posts from long ago. That said, she wasn't right. It was worse, definitely worse than anything about white supremacy. She's targeting an identifiable group of people. And she's saying they're all, she's implying strongly that every Jew is money hungry. She taught the Jew train, defining people by their religion, their ethnicity. That's a problem. That's very different from saying this policy is for the purpose of enforcing white supremacy. I don't agree with that allegation, but it's not the same. That's not in and of itself a racist or loaded, in the sense of the way this is. But I'm of two minds. She says she's the mother of Jewish children. Do you get a pass? No. But if your children are Jewish, maybe you get a little bit more leeway. Maybe. Especially because, let's say the kids are young. So she's changed. She's evolved. She's different than she was 15 years ago. We all change. If she was really good at her job, I don't know, maybe you weather the storm if you're Mamdani. I'm not clear on that. But it's not the same. And he wasn't wrong to accept her resignation. He was right to keep Sia Weaver on, despite the tweets about white supremacy. All right, that's going to do it for me. 240-242. 5646 is the number, but not now because I am taking off for the rest of the afternoon. By the way, Ken, thank you. Ken's got some really nice things to say. Thank you, saying you enjoy over an hour. Really, really appreciate that. I will be back tomorrow. It'll just be Hal again. Thank you so much for being part of Halitics. And don't forget, tell your friends, tell your colleagues, anybody who, and I just, again, I think it's unfortunate that we all gravitate in general towards people who say what we think is true and what we want to hear and reinforce our views. I think it's really important to be challenged. And I wish more people were willing to be challenged. I'll say, like, there's a guy, I've talked about him before. This is my final word. He's very famous. He's got a hugely successful podcast. Guy who's married to Crystal Ball. Now I can't remember his name. Kyle Kalinske, right? A lot he says I disagree with very strongly. I would love to be able to call his program and argue with him and say, Kyle, this is where you're wrong. And this is why I say that. I would assume people would feel the same way when they watch my video. Hey, Hal says this, he's wrong. I want to tell him why and how. So when that happens, call me up and tell me where to get off. I'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for being part of Halitics.